Welcome to Politically Basic. I'm your host, Kyle Campbell. As we always do, we're breaking down the basics of all political issues so you get to decide. I'm going straight at it today. On the show with me, a giant of the media, the one and only Brent Bozell. He's founder and president of the Media Research Center. It's America's top media watchdog organization. Brent is a very serious political insider. He's friends with all the people in D.C. you want and need to know. And he's been our nation's top media expert forever. And wow, do we have a lot to talk about regarding the media right now. Brent, I can't thank you enough for being on the show with me today.
Thanks for having me, Kyle.
Well, I'm going to maximize my time with you today, Brent, and jump right in to hearing the basics from you. We hear about a journalistic ethic in the media and about a free press. What is it that media is meant to do in a free country?
Well, it depends how we define media. If we're talking about the news media, it's a real simple proposition. You report the news. It tells you something, Kyle, that no one calls himself or herself a reporter anymore. Everyone's a journalist. What's the difference? A reporter reports. A journalist can be most anything. A journalist can be an editorial writer. It can be an analyst. It can be a commentator. It can be an anchor. It can be a reporter. It can be all sorts of different things. The problem is that so many in the media today are not reporters, but insist you consider them reporters, insist you consider them as reporting news, when what they're doing is editorializing, they're analyzing, they're commentating, they're doing anything but reporting news. The problem with the news media today is that you no longer get news. If you look at ABC, NBC, CBS, in half-hour or hour-long newscasts, only a small part of it is real news. If you go to the 24-hour cable news shows, only a fraction of it is real news. Everything else is a talk show, it's commentary, it's debate, it's comedy, whatever you want to call it, but it's not news. So the problem with the news media is that you don't have news.
Well, it's a far departure from where they started and what they're supposed to do. So when, in your opinion, did the media start to change, and why, do you think?
Yeah, it's a really good question because the media would like you to believe that they're objective. In fact, Kyle, there's no such thing as objectivity. If you've had a frontal lobotomy and you've lost the ability to use your brain, then perhaps you're objective at that point. Until then, you have opinions, and there's no way an opinion can't come out. Leslie Midgley was a man who was Walter Cronkite's longtime producer. He wrote a book called How Many Words Do You Want? And in that book, he split it. The first half was his days in the print media. The second half was his days on television. In the first half, he asked the question, in print media, what is news? And his answer was, news is what the editor says it is. And then in the second half of the book, he asked the question, what is news on television? And the answer was, news is what the producer says it is. And you know, he's absolutely right. Those are both subjective calls. You can look at the front page of the Washington Post and the front page of the Washington Times. The editors will give you a very eloquent and convincing argument for why the stories they chose were the stories that should be on the front page of a paper. And yet they could be completely different. It's seen from the worldview of those editors. By the way, that guy, Leslie Midgley, went on to in covering the war in Vietnam with Walter Cronkite. I don't know why this thing just hit. He wrote about how Walter Cronkite was in favor of the Vietnam War, so he decided to change his mind by taking him to the places in Vietnam where it would change his mind on the war, and he succeeded. And he talked about how for the rest of the war, while Walter Cronkite was again projecting himself as Mr. Objectivity, the best newsman in America, Leslie Midgley, his producer, talked about how he and Leslie Midgley were trying to turn American political opinion against the war. And the final words of that book, if I recall, were, we were doing the work of the Lord. It's not up to a reporter to do the work of the Lord. It's up to a reporter to report news and nothing but that.
Well, they sure think they're doing it. That is
They do.
fascinating to hear. I mean, they're really committed to it. Now, Brent, you're committed to what you've given your life to, which is to really task the media to kind of get back on track. What is wrong with them now? They are not doing this well. And I want to bring up one example. The first Biden-Trump debate before Joe Biden removed himself from the race, and probably rightly so. But the media had a major shift there. I'm dying for your opinion on this, because what we saw immediately after that debate was the media turn on Joe Biden, the man they had been covering for and protecting and building up for months and arguably for years. It changed, and we thought, oh, they've seen the light. Okay, maybe they're not doing what they're really supposed to be doing, but we're finally getting some truth from them. And then it snapped back as fast as you'd snap a rubber band. What is going on?
Well, Kyle, they didn't see the light. America saw the light. They knew the condition of Joe Biden for a long, long time. They saw the deterioration. They kept it from the American people. But then he did a debate with Donald Trump, and he was live on television, and everyone saw what the media knew, and the media weren't reporting. This is very, I think, instructional to the American people to understand the degree to which they're being manipulated by the press. Had the press reported the truth about Joe Biden, there would have been real questions about removing him from office some time ago because of his deteriorating mental acuity. Now look what's happening before our very eyes. Look at the manipulation. As we do this interview now, we're on day 29, where Kamala Harris has refused to talk to the media since being put forward as the Democratic, anointed as the Democratic candidate and announcing her run for office. She has not done a single press conference, but she hasn't done interviews either. But that's only half the story. The other half of the story, Kyle, is the media doing stories on her. Just because she's not doing an interview doesn't mean that the media can't be doing a story on her positions. And what you've seen since she announced her campaign for the presidency, you've seen a complete cone of silence on her, on projecting who she is and telling the truth about her. Silence, her refusing to do media, silence, the media allowing themselves to be humiliated by her refusing to do any media. They hate Donald Trump so much that they are going along with this. And on top of that, they're not making any effort whatsoever to report the truth about her. So at this point, Kamala Harris is what people want her to be. And in politics, perception beats reality. So this is working as of this moment. This is working beautifully for Kamala Harris. If the public knew where she stood on her issues, I believe Donald Trump would be ahead by 20 to 30 points right now.
Wow. Well, Brent, you're the guy. You are the main name in cutting through media misinformation and getting to the truth. You started Parents Television Council, and then you went on to start Media Research Center. And we all know you and know MRC. Tell my listeners a little bit about what the work is that you're doing there at the MRC. I want to get back to Kamala Harris, but I want them to hear about the work that you're doing there.
Well, Kyle, when I started the MRC way too long ago in 1987, the proposition was this. Actually, the idea was born in the Avis parking lot at DFW Airport, should anyone care. But at that time, I was thinking about the fact that conservatives we were doing very well. We had lots of political action committees and foundations and lobbying organizations and associations and the like. But what we didn't have was something that was addressing the most powerful arm of the left in America, which is the national news media. In 1987, what you have for news was ABC, NBC, CBS, and fledgling CNN on television. You had AP and UPI as the wire services. You had a handful of major newspapers, Washington Post, LA Times, New York Times, Chicago Tribune. And then you had Time and Newsweek and US News for magazines. What was interesting was every single one of them was liberal. Every single last one. If you were a conservative and wanted to communicate with the public, you either went through National Review magazine every 2 weeks with 100,000 readers, or Human Events every week with 30,000 readers, or maybe Paul Harvey in the afternoon on on a Chicago radio station, or you put a message in a bottle and you threw it in the water. That's how conservatives were able to communicate. Everything was going through the filter of the liberal media. The problem with that, Kyle, was that no matter how great our ideas, they went into the media as prime rib, and they came out on the other end as raw sewage. So the American people were always hearing a distorted view of what it was we believed in, whether it was tax policy, foreign policy, national defense, social issues, whatever it might be. What they got was the liberal spin on it. So I thought, we've got to do something about the media. So what do you do about them? Well, you were up against a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, again, controlling everything in the news. But I knew that they had an Achilles heel, which was credibility. Because if you could go for the credibility, and if you could show how liberal they were, what you could do is create a market demand for an alternative. Rush Limbaugh, God bless him, and boy, do we miss him.
Mm-hmm.
Rush used to say publicly all the time that if it had not been for the MRC, there would not be a Rush Limbaugh, which is nonsense because there would not have been Rush Limbaugh without Rush Limbaugh. But he was making the point in that we did create a market alternative, with the public finally started seeing, because when we started in 1987, 75% of the public believed what they were getting was objective truth from the news media. And how else could they not? Because they didn't know the reality of the world when everybody was reporting it the same way when in a liberal context. So 75% believed that what they were getting was objective truth. Once you showed them how it was not objectively truthful, how there was a liberal slant to it, then suddenly people started demanding alternatives. And the way we did that was by documenting everything that they were doing and then simply exposing what it was that they were doing to the light of day. And that's where ultimately Fox came from, and all the conservative talk radio emerged. All of that was a demand for an alternative to what they were getting in the press.
It's tremendous.
Long-winded answer.
Well, no. It's tremendous. And people need to understand what you have allowed the American people, which is the opportunity to take the blinders off, because we only know what we know. We can only take in the information that we are given, and you are providing the alternative of truth. So we're grateful to you for it. Now, Joe Biden was supposed to be the great unifier of this country. He ran on a campaign of unifying the nation, and we're more divided than ever. Media seems to stoke that fire. Is it worse than ever? And in your opinion, is there any hope that they can recover from this and get back to being a fact deliverer and not this heavily biased opinion shaper that they are now?
Yeah, it is worse than ever. And we predicted it some years ago for this reason. When the media were exposed for who they were, and these were liberals with a liberal bias back then, they really had two choices to make, which was either correct their ways or go all out. And I suggested in a book that Tim Graham and I wrote some years ago that they would do what a cornered rat does. It instinctively goes for the jugular. And we predicted that they would go for the jugular against conservatives. But what's happened now is that It's no longer a liberal press. When you think of liberal from the standpoint of a Joe Lieberman liberal, even a Ted Kennedy liberal, these people they're neo-Marxists. They are the tip of the spear for the neo-Marxist left that has emerged in the United States. If you look at some of the most radical, let's take the most radical political organization in America today, Black Lives Matter. Why do I say radical? Forget the rioting in the streets and the mayhem they caused in the summer of 2020. Simply look at their manifesto, which they've tried taking it off the internet. If you look, you'll find it. The Black Lives Matter that is run by two self-proclaimed, founded and run by two self-proclaimed lesbian Marxists, had as its manifesto, and it's there in black and white in a very short manifesto, their desire to destroy the nuclear family and to destroy the Judeo-Christian underpinning of Western civilization. Read it, it's right there. Now, if you look at that and you say to yourself, that's the most radical left-wing idea imaginable, consider the fact that the news media on a regular basis endorse it. They project BLM as being mainstream as mainstream can be. They endorse this worldview. So they have become, they are the tip of the spear of the radicalized militant left. What compounds all this, Kyle, is they have a hatred for Donald Trump, unlike anything I've ever witnessed my entire life. I thought they didn't like Ronald Reagan. They love Ronald Reagan compared to this man. The humiliation that they're going through right now with Kamala Harris refusing to talk to them, Kamala Harris refusing to do a press conference to be asked by any questions. Anybody else, if it were anyone else running against her, I'm convinced they wouldn't take this line down. They would be insisting that she present herself for questions, that she hold a press conference, that she submit to interviews. They'd be insisting on this. But their hatred for Donald Trump trumps, no pun intended, everything. Anything that will defeat Donald Trump is something they embrace, including being humiliated. And they're being humiliated.
You're so right. And they will do anything, it appears, to cover for her at all costs. So what the American people are seeing right now is that the media is portraying Kamala Harris as the second coming. And the internet's forever. You just said it. You can go back and look at that BLM manifesto. The internet is forever, and people are dredging up everything she said, videos of her. And you talk about blinders on, she's just waving it away. Now, they're covering for her, but you know the truth. What is the truth about Kamala Harris? Who is she?
Well, let me tell you, Kyle, let me tell you what you and I know and what Democrats don't know. And this is based on a survey that we conducted a week ago, where we simply laid out a number of issues and asked the Democrats if they just knew about those issues. Now, here's some numbers, and they're going to startle you because you're going to say to yourself, it can't be true. This is a national survey. 71% of Democrats were unaware that Harris supported cutting funding for the police. By the way, in another survey we took, I believe the number was 89% of the American people are in favor of fully funding police. And the left is running everywhere from their policies of defunding the police, watching cities burn to the ground as a result. 71% were unaware that she supported defunding police. 73% were not aware that she co-sponsored the Green New Deal, which is the most radical climate agenda, multi-trillion-dollar agenda in the history of man. 81% of Democrats had no idea that she supports eliminating all private health coverage. 81% don't know this. 71% did not know that Kamala Harris publicly has endorsed reparation payments to to atone for slavery. 72% were unaware that since becoming border czar, isn't it great? They just pretend now she wasn't border czar. When they celebrated her being named border czar, and now they're saying, well, we never said she was a border czar. A flat out lie. 72% of Democrats have no idea she's never visited a conflict zone while she was border czar. 75%. This is a full 3 out of 4 Democrats have no idea that in 2019 she was named the most liberal senator in America. Yes, to the left of Bernie Sanders. 74%. Again, 3 out of 4. How about this one? Know that Kamala Harris said it should not be considered a crime to enter the United States illegally. So her belief is anybody who wants to can cross the border, meaning there are no borders in the United States. 3 out of 4 Democrats don't know that's her position. Imagine, Kyle, what they would think if they knew that was her position. 77% of Democrats have no idea that Kamala Harris supports abolishing ICE. So there you go. The one entity that would protect the border, or one of the entities that would protect the border, she wants to abolish. 78%, this is one that really gets me, 78% of Democrats have no idea that she promoted a fund to bail out the violent protesters of 2020, the BLM protester. She supported a fund, a legal defense fund, to do this. Finally, 86% of Democrats have no idea that Kamala Harris supports giving voting rights to death row inmates. And just imagine, Kyle, what would happen if Democrats knew any one of those issues? And you're talking about an election that is decided by the slightest of margins. There's one analysis that's been done that shows that this election is going to be decided in 40 counties. It's going to be decided. You look at the battleground states; they were all decided a point here, a point there, 2 points there, 2.5 points there. That's all it takes to move an election. When you've got 3 out of 4 Democrats have no idea about these issues, imagine what would happen if they did. And this is what I mean, that Trump would win by 20 points. I think he would win one of the biggest landslides in history if the news media simply reported the news, Kyle. Nothing more than that. Report what it is. This is why she doesn't do press conferences. This is why she doesn't do interviews. She doesn't want to be asked what her position is. These are all her stated public positions.
You're so right. They are covering like we've never seen before. But people are wise to this, Brent, and they're not exactly sure what to do about it, but they're not just taking it lying down. Now, I want to ask you what the solution is to this. You have mrc.org, everybody needs to go. You have Mythbusters, where you provide this factual, accurate information, but it's bigger than that, right? And how do we solve the problem of this rampant misinformation and all of these mistruths coming from media across the board? What's the solution?
Well, I think on the macro, our movement has to learn how to become a movement of storytelling. I know you folks are very big on this, and that needs to be where we go. There are some who have understood the power of storytelling. Jim Caviezel understands it. Mel Gibson understands it. Others understand it as well, but we don't understand it enough. We can't expect the networks to do what they're supposed to do. They are utterly unethical in what they're doing. It's a complete violation of all journalistic standards, but they're so politicized. That is who they are. So that means that we have to tell the stories, and we have to understand we have lots of avenues now with which to do it. Yes, censorship exists, and that could be a whole other show, especially on how big tech is doing it and what the consequences of censorship can be. And if we have a minute, we can talk about the censorship, what happened in 2020. That censorship cost Donald Trump the election in 2020. You do have that, but you still have ways you can communicate. Elon Musk has reopened Twitter for people to use. Donald Trump won the presidency in 2016 using Twitter. So Twitter is a very powerful tool. Streaming media is a very powerful tool. We have to learn how to use entertainment, the entertainment industry. The left mastered the politics of the entertainment industry years ago. No reason why we can't get into the same mode that they're in. That's on the macro. On the micro, which is this election cycle, look, you have to tell your neighbor. It's just as simple as that. It might be telling your neighbor at a cocktail party. It might be telling your neighbor during a carpool. It might be telling your neighbor by going on a radio show. It might be telling your neighbor by urging them to go on Fox. Whatever it might be, you've got to speak to your neighbor yourself and not expect any news media to do it for you. You have to use streaming video. Again, there are some people who are very good at that, but we have to go beyond ourselves and beyond our own communities. Talk radio is a terrific way for conservatives to stay engaged, to stay educated, to stay mobilized, but it doesn't go beyond the talk radio community. So it won't go beyond the conservatives. We have to go beyond our base and be creative on how we do it. The other one thing that we have to do is start making some demands, I think, of the advertising community. I think advertisers should be held to account for what they're doing advertising on these network news shows. They are complicit in the projection of a cover-up. They are, in fact, paying for that cover-up by advertising on these shows. I think there needs to be a long conversation within the conservative movement about having an effort to say to these advertisers, for once and for all, we're going to hold you responsible. If you advertise on ABC News and ABC covers up the truth from the American people, you're guilty of covering up that truth as well, and start taking a pretty tough position on them.
Yeah, you hit it. Everybody's got to have exceptional discernment these days. Check out Newsbusters, start talking again, having the open dialogue, sharing what's real and what's accurate. And I like that you are bringing up advertisers, holding advertisers accountable for their participation in this. Brent, you are such a remarkable person in this space. Your history, your experience, your expertise, that brain of yours, I feel like we must protect Brent Bozell at all costs.
From himself.
Protect him. I want to end on a more personal note. People might not know, and I had to be reminded, your uncle was William F. Buckley Jr., who is widely considered to be one of the most influential commentators and writers of the conservative movement. What did you hear and learn and observe growing up in such a deeply educated and patriotic family?
Yeah, if you look back on his era, it was a kinder era than it is today. You had a divided country then, but you had the kind of divided country where you could go for the jugular with your political enemies and still be good friends. He and the economist John Galbraith used to rip each other to shreds on a regular basis. And you could see them ripping each other in that they would each ask the other to write a blurb for the books that the other was coming out, because they knew it would be an attack. So it would be Evan Galbraith, it would be John Galbraith writing something and Bill's book. Don't you dare read this book. It's a terrible, terrible book. And Bill would write the same thing for Galbraith on his books. And it was just a way to poke fun at each other and to have a very good time. And they were very, very close friends. You could do that. You can't do that today. And it's something that saddens me greatly, that you can't you can't talk to the other side. And I believe that it's not, that there is this a projection from the press that conservatives have become radicalized. And that's absolute nonsense. If you look at what conservatives are, or look at members of Congress who call themselves conservatives, and look at the things they support today, and compared to what conservatives were supporting 25 years ago, I'm telling you, it's a difference of night and day. Quote unquote conservatives just took the pro-life position out of the Republican Party platform. The conservatives 25 years ago would never have supported the kind of drunken spending going on in Washington. In fact, liberals 25 years ago would not have supported the kind of drunken spending that goes on. So conservatives today are not nearly as conservatives as they were 25 years ago. 25 years ago, in the era of Bill Buckley, you could defend a much more conservative worldview, and it not be so caustic, and so nasty out there. That is to me the greatest takeaway. Bill Buckley founded the modern conservative movement. He founded it by going to war against the left, and yet could have cocktails at 5:30.
We should absolutely remember that. And I hope and pray that we can come back to that as a nation and find our way back to that kinder era that you remember. And Brent, I just can't thank you enough for giving of your time today, for your wisdom. I mean, your wisdom cuts through this overwhelming amount of just lies and information that we are working through today. I'm going to beg you for time in the future. You've been so generous with it today. And thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Please make sure you're checking out mrc.org and newsbusters.org for factual news reporting. And just big thanks again to Mr. Brent Bozell for the work that you're doing for the country and for giving us your time today on the so very important topic of the media.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Politically Basic. We're committed to breaking down the basics so that you get to decide. Be sure to check us out at politicallybasic.com and follow us at Politically Basic so you don't miss an episode. And we'll see you next time.